I'm on to the next section of King George during the Great War. This topic is entitled Austerity. I found this book on thriftbooks.com. It sold for less than $10. So I'm going to just go ahead and get started. I'm just going to show you some pictures of King George during World War I, the Great War. So I will go ahead and begin reading. The war seemed scarcely to touch the home life of the nation. Families mourned their dead. Otherwise, it was both business and pleasure as usual. When, in December 1915, General Sir Douglas Haig was promoted to Commander-in-Chief of the British forces in France, he asked the War Office who was to succeed him in command of the First Army. He received the reply that both the Prime Minister and the Secretary of War, Lord Kirchner, had left London for the weekend and that nothing could be settled until Monday. A few months later, he was ordered to cancel all army and leave between 18 and 25 April 1916. He was to cancel all his army leave and leave by then, because the home railways would be too busy dealing with the Easter traffic. I wonder what the future historian will write about Great Britain, whose inhabitants in a period of crisis insist that these holiday makers should be given preference in traveling to soldiers from the seat of war. The profusion of domestic servants on which all but the poorest classes of society depended was only slowly depleted. By the second month of the war, 61 of the male staff at Buckingham Palace had volunteered for the armed forces, but many remained. Not only the introduction of military conscription in 1916 did large number of women begin to replace men in the munitions industry and other male preserves. Fritz Ponsonby's wife, working for much of 1915 in a soldier's canteen in France, received a War Office traveling pass made out for Lady Ponsonby and maid. Lord Bertie, the British ambassador to France, dined at the Carlton Hotel while on leave in London that autumn. I found the restaurant cramful, no signs of war within, except for some few men in khaki and a few limping. All the rest in piping times of peace, low gowns, very low, and nearly all the men in evening swallow-tail coats. Most of them were wearing white waistcoats. He was even more scandalized by the failure of politicians and senior officials to set an example of restraint. During the journey of the continent, less than 48 hours, a British minister and 5 companions with 3 servants consumed, or they are charged as having drunk 27 bottles of wine at prices ranging from 2 francs to 12 francs per bottle. There were 39 glasses of liquor, and 19 bottles of beer. Who on a journey on a private account would drink in a railway car a claret of 12 francs a bottle? It is discreditable that this should be at the public expense. As late in war as January 1918, Bonner's Law private secretary, dining in Paris with a fellow Treasury official, Maynard Keynes, complained that he could not find champagne dry enough, but Napoleon brandy was excellent. and a few days later at Maxim's, dinner consisted of oysters, trout, chicken, spring peas, fruit, coffee, a claret of red and white liqueur brandy. We then went to the Folies Bergère, the secretariat of the Committee of Imperial Defense, and celebrated Maurice Hankey's knighthood with a dinner of 8 courses at the Army and Navy Club. The invitations parodied the style of an official minute and were printed on the pale green paper always used by that department. The King and Queen, by contrast, imposed an austere restraint on their public and private pleasures alike. "I cannot share your hardships," the king told his troops, "but my heart is with you every hour of the day." While preserving the essentials of monarchy, he saw to it that no immeasurable gulf should separate his own life from that of any other soldier or sailor on the active service. He gave away most of his civilian wardrobe, and he ordered no new clothes except uniforms of khaki and navy blue. Yeah, I read this. He restrained his budget because that was the only sacrifice he could connect with the soldiers. That's something to be said, that he gave away his civilian wardrobe and ordered no new clothes except uniforms. He started that. And when King George VI, during World War II, he always wore his uniform. So as long as the war lasted, he rarely dined out and he never went to the theater. His only relaxation in London was to spend an hour or two each week with his stamp collection. Balmoral was closed. The gardens at Frogmore turned over to potatoes planted during afternoons of strenuous digging. And although he continued to shoot during brief holidays at Sandringham, that too could be regarded as a patriotic contribution to the nation's leader. General Smuts, the South African representative in the Imperial War Cabinet, wrote that at the Savoy Hotel in October 1917, to thank the king for a brace of pheasants, 6 partridges, and a hare, is most welcome and cheering in these days of short rations and food control. Always the most thrifty of housekeepers, Queen Mary rooted out extravagance with virtuous enthusiasm. Balfour's private secretary noted that the courtier's return to duty at Buckingham Palace dreads the change from the ample luxury and service of his own table to the Spartan regime of the royal household. An equerry who came late to breakfast, having been delayed by a telephone call, found that there was nothing left to eat, so rang the bell for a boiled egg. It was he who ordered a dozen turkeys. He could not have made a bigger stir, Ponsonby wrote. The king accused him of being a slave to his inside, an unpatriotic behavior, and even went so far as to hint we should lose the war on the account of his gluttony. Puddings and lamb were banished from the royal kitchens, and they were to be replaced by fowl and mutton, though neither in profusion. No longer was each member of the royal family given a clean table napkin at every meal, but made to use that economical device, the napkin ring. On a fine summer day, the king and queen ordered tea at Adelaide Cottage in Windsor Park. It was prepared by a single servant using a dirty kettle instead of the usual silver urn. Guests were unanimous in recording the simplicity of the fare, at least by peacetime standards. It was a very plain little dinner, I remember, wrote Mr. Fortescue, wife of the king's librarian. Mulligatawny soup, shrimp sauce, vegetable cutlets, green peas, new potatoes, asparagus, cold-baked custard in a china cup, and dessert. The future Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, recorded a menu of soup, salmon trout, chicken, and a nasty sort of pink mold for a sweet. Even the traditional Derby Day dinner for 32 at Buckingham Palace, considered in 1917, of soup, fish, chicken, and macaroni, without either meat or wine, and may be contrasted with a dinner given in the same year by the President of the French Republic: caviar, turbot, saddle a lamb, roast partridge, and roast pheasant, salad, Neapolitan ice, strawberries, grapes, peaches, and pears. Not until the last year of the war did the British government declare a public meals order of severity. It imposed 2 meatless days in each week and the rationing of fats, bread, and certain other foods. Although applying principally to hotels and restaurants, the restrictions place an additional burden on private households, even the richest of them, but it cannot have been made much a difference to the elevated frugality already enforced at Buckingham Palace and Windsor. Elsewhere, the shock was considerable. A guest of the Asquith, they complained in her diary, "I have a minute snipe. Wish they were several like whitebait." A zealous minister once assured the king that if Buckingham Palace were to be bombed by German aircraft, it would have a stimulating effect on the people. He received the brisk reply, "Yes, but rather a depressing effect on me." Lloyd George risked precisely that answer when in the spring of 1915 he raised an equally unpalatable topic. He urged the king to set an example to the nation by abstaining from alcohol for the duration of the war. What might otherwise have been thought an impertinence on the chancellor's part sprang from the alarm of a disruptive effect on heavy drinking by factory workers, particularly in the armament and shipbuilding industries. "Drink is doing more damage in this war," Lloyd George told a meeting of fellow Welshmen, "than all the German submarines put together." Although a man of temperate habits, the king was accustomed to drink a little bit of wine with his meals and a glass of port after dinner. He nevertheless responded instantly to a call of patriotism. On March 30th, 1915, Stanfordham wrote to Lloyd George, "If it is deemed advisable, His Majesty will be prepared to set an example by giving up all alcohol liquor himself throughout his household, so that no difference shall be made so far as he is concerned between the treatment of rich and poor." Privately, the king allowed himself quite a grumble. "It's a great bore," he told his uncle, the Duke of Connaught. He expressed the same sentiment to Lord Hardinge in more stately language. "I confess that total abstention is not agreeable to me." His self-denial evoked ribaldry rather than respect. By a happy mischance, the court circular announced the edict from Windsor was followed by the words, "The Earl of Rosebery and the Right Honourable A.J. Balfour, M.P., have left the castle." Writing that day to thank the king for his hospitality, Rosebery added, "I shall never forget the wistful carnival on Monday, when a last farewell to alcohol was said with marbled sadness, or a deluge of waters on Tuesday. It was reported that Rosebery got such a hiccup after drinking one glass of unaccustomed ginger beer that he could not continue talking to the Queen. And Etty Desborough, a lady in waiting, told a friend, "I hear a sad account of Windsor Castle is on the wagon." Tempers were but little improved by temperance, and a crepe wreath was fastened to the cellar door. Charlie Cuss fainted the first night after dinner. The only cheerful person being was Margot, who took copious swigs out of the medicine bottle and talked a great deal, but no one else spoke except to contradict her. The king's visit to the fleet and to his troops in France ceased to be convivial. The teetotal business is a severe trial. Admiral Beatty noted, "The old boys don't get communicative without a drink of some form or other. We have struggled along, supported by barley water." Nor did Haig ever forget General Joffre's look of abhorrence when, invited to lunch for the king at British headquarters, he was offered the choice of lemonade and ginger beer. The Sybaritic Haldane was more fortunate. On being replaced as Lord Chancellor, he found consolation in abandoning the pledge he had taken as keeper of the king's conscience. So he enjoyed his dry champagne and his super excellent liqueurs. Perhaps the rules of abstinence at Buckingham Palace were not as rigid as some supposed. Cider certainly was deemed to be non-alcoholic. There is also the mischievous testimony of the Prince of Wales, who claimed that his father would withdraw after dinner to attend to a small matter of business. This was assumed to be a small glass of port. The dutiful son also alleged his mother's fruit cup was sometimes filled with champagne. Well, that is very interesting. Both the king and the queen would have borne their self-imposed asceticism without complaint had it achieved its purpose and encouraged others to follow the royal example. Their gesture, however, was generally ignored and sometimes derided. The king did not hide his belief that Lord George had made him look foolish, and the queen, who liked to flourish in an occasional colloquialism, confided to a sympathetic Mr. Asquith, "We have been carded." And that is the end of the austere topic. So the next topic I will take up in the next episode.